Hey, one of the calls we get all the time is about people wanting to come to Kentucky and buy land. Is it a good deal? Is it not a good deal? Let me give you a few things to consider when looking at buying land in Kentucky. Things that I would look at. Hey guys, two things. Number one, we're getting a lot of first-time homebuyers reaching out. We have created the first-time homebuyers guide. It's downloadable in the link below. It answers all your questions as far as A to Z, what you need to do, helps cut down on any confusion. It's really helpful. Make sure you check it out. Number two, we're getting a lot of relocators. We've also created a guide for that. Also downloadable in the link below. Again, answers everything A to Z, all about moving to Central Kentucky. Make sure you check it out. If you have any questions, reach out. So I've got 10 points. Number one, location. The number one rule in real estate is location, location, location. But depending on what kind of land you want to buy and what you want to do with it, you've got to consider the location. And depending on what county you're in, sometimes we have zoning. So if you're buying a piece of ground and you want to keep it as a small farm or something, that's pretty easy to do. But maybe you're trying to buy a piece of ground and develop it. That's a little bit more legal work, paperwork type stuff that we've got to get through. But anyway, either way, I mean, those options are available in Kentucky. We just got to know what we're buying, what we plan on using it for, and is it legally permissible. That's the appraiser talk. The second thing you got to consider is property size. So we get a lot of people who are like, that want to buy land for all different reasons. Some people want to have a big yard, if you will, which is 100% okay. And some people want to have animals like cows or horses and chickens and pigs and whatever the case, llamas, whatever the case you may really want. And so once you start to kind of narrowing down what you want to do with your land and where you want your land to be, we need to consider, like, are you going to have cows? So typically Dad always said if you have cows, you need to have at least an acre, if not two, per cow or horse. They're about the same. And honestly, I grew up on a big farm and we had cattle and stuff. And when me and Valerie first met, I think my family had like 400 head of cattle. And so that's just something I've kind of been around my whole life. But when you have one cow, you got to have two cows. They need a friend. And I know that sounds weird, but they just do better when there's multiple of them. It's kind of like they need a social interaction. I don't know if that's how that works or not, but they just tend to be a little easier to work with. I know it's crazy, but it's true. Also, if you're getting into buying land and you want to have animals, we need to make sure that you don't want to have a 2-acre lot and 2 cows on your 2-acre lot and that is it. You need to have enough land that you can kind of move them around a little bit. You want to kind of sustain healthy livestock. And so a little more land is better. It helps you kind of keep up with being able to move your ground and not always it lets you be able to move your livestock around, and also it keeps you from having a huge mud pit in the winter because your cows don't have anywhere else to go other than where they're at. And I've seen that, and it's really sad when you do see that, but it does happen. Now, I'm going to kind of go on this like you're buying a piece of ground to have a farm. This is how I grew up, and this is kind of something that speaks to me because it's a great lifestyle. So when I go through the rest of these points, just kind of follow along with me. Now, one of the things that we get is people want to move to Kentucky and have a horse or have a couple of cows or whatever it is that you want. Again, 100% all for it. But one thing you got to consider is our growing season here is normally like 7 to 8 months. So we start to see grass grow sometime in March, and then by late October, early November, depending on a year, maybe early October, grass growing season is over. And so as you have animals, going kind of back to the property size and things we've got to consider, you also have to consider like the type of dirt and the quality of dirt you're buying. Does it need a lot of extra fertilizer or lime so that you can grow enough grass to feed your animals all winter? Because if you don't have enough space or enough hay inputs, if you will, you run into a thing of now we're buying hay. And getting into the buying hay thing, the next point you got to realize is like, what kind of infrastructure do you have? Because if we're buying hay to feed animals, it's a lot cheaper to buy hay in those giant round bales than it is to buy the little square bales you can move by hand. And when you're feeding the animals, one, you can put a round bale out, maybe only feed them, have to take hay to them once a week or once every other week. Or if you're doing it by hand, you're doing it every day. And if you got those big bales and you got to buy a tractor, tractors are expensive. Believe me, I know, because I look at them, because I'm weird like that. And that stuff interests me. So when you look at just all the costs, we really got to be smart about what we're doing. Now, I'm not saying this to talk you out of it. I grew up on a farm. My family still has a huge farm. If I get a day off when I can go to the farm and get dirty, I will absolutely go. That's just where I like to go, and that's one of my favorite things to do. So I love that lifestyle, and I would commend anyone that can do it. It will change your family for the better, I promise. So looking at just with the soil conditions and soil types, and you know, we got to make sure this all kind of goes into the whole thing of what we're doing, looking at what we're using the ground for, and you know, having animals. One thing we got to consider is water. Now we have lots of water in Kentucky. We have lived out west where you have water rights and water shares and all that other stuff, but in Kentucky we have tons of water, but you have to get the water. And so if you start buying county water or water from the, you know, city water to water your animals, depending on how many you got, that can get quite expensive. And if you got to drill a well to get free water, if you will, that is also expensive as well. So again, we're going through like all these process and these conversations, and this is a conversation we have all the time. So like, these are the things you've got to consider, the things you've got to think about. You know, make sure we know what the costs are going to be so that we set you up for the best possible scenario moving forward, that, you know, you're not in a situation like, why didn't you tell me it was going to cost $15,000 to drill a well? And I'm like, I didn't know you needed a well to feed or do whatever. So we, you know, we got to talk about all this stuff, and this is really what this video is about. The next point is, you know, going back into like topography. I don't know if y'all, you know, if you're from Kentucky, you probably know this or you've been through this part of the country, but it's not like a really flat state like Ohio or Illinois. We have flat parts of the state, and we have places that are like Billy Goat country, up and down and all around. And again, going back into buying a piece of ground, if you get a piece of ground that I would say was rough, which would be really up and down, it's a lot cheaper. And then people see these on Zillow or Realtor.com, like, oh, I can buy 30 acres and for whatever, and that's cheap. And I'm like, yeah, but if you really look at it, you might have a half an acre that's flat enough to build a house on all that 30 acres, and you're going to spend a fortune getting a road into it and getting your utilities put into it. And again, I'm not saying this to like talk you out of anything. Well, I'd love to have these conversations. This is actually the stuff I enjoy, but it's more of a look at the whole picture and let's set up expectations versus false expectations, which maybe you get here and you think, well, I'm gonna buy this 30 acres and it's gonna be awesome when you get there. I mean, like, you need a rappelling kit to get up to the top of it. That's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that you guys are set up for success and set those expectations up front. That way it is a better experience for you all around. Now, if you're starting a hobby farm, or even if you buy a big piece of ground and you're coming from an urban area, one thing I'm going to tell you, you will be in a constant state of learning for like the next 5 years, maybe the rest of your life, depending on what you're trying to set up. And you have to be okay with that. There's a lot of times that when you get into working with cattle or equipment, stuff breaks, cows get sick, and your livestock gets sick. You've got to, you know, there's all these things to consider. And what you find pretty quick, unless you just have buku money, you have to do a lot of the work yourself to save money so that you can keep everything going like it used to, like you needed to. Now, at least when we had our blueberry farm, I pretty much did everything myself, just because I didn't have the money to hire out a lot of stuff. So it was a deal for me of making sure that I could do as much as I can, which leads me to my next point, is always want to track your expenses. If you buy a farm and you're over 10 acres, you can get a schedule. You can file a Schedule F in Kentucky, which means if you buy a tractor, you buy hay, you buy feed, you buy any of that stuff, you buy a big diesel pickup truck, it's all tax deductible. Now, I'm not an accountant. Make sure you refer to your accountant. Don't let me give you accounting advice, but that is something to consider. So make sure you're tracking your expenses in order to maximize the tax structure of owning a piece of ground over 10 acres in Kentucky. Now, this is the greatest piece of advice I can give you, hands down, on buying ground or starting a farm. Find you a guy who wears work boots, bib overalls, and a hat that says John Deere International, like an implement hat, because you need that guy as a friend. Matter of fact, right up here is my dad. This is the type of guy that you want to make friends with. They will help you do anything, and they know how to do everything. I promise you. That is, if you stayed to this part of this video, that was worth the wait. You know, like I say, I grew up on a farm, and if you're getting into farming generationally, it's still hard to do and hard to make work. But if you're starting from scratch, I mean, I did a quick search the other day on tractors, and I looked at a 2016 5065E John Deere, which is about a 65 horsepower tractor, had a front end loader on it, big enough to do most things that you would probably want to do on a 20 or 30 acre farm. Again, 2016, so that joker's coming up on what, 8 years old. It's still 30 grand. And if you're getting like a big farm, like there's a John Deere 9RX up here at the Right Implement dealer right now, down the road from us, it's 600 grand. So I mean, you can spend as much money as you want. Your combines are $500,000, and that's just for the combine. And you know, you throw another $100,000 on for each head, you can spend $700,000 to $750 million on a used combine, which is just really crazy. So it's incredibly expensive to get into. Hobby farming's not so bad because you can find some used equipment to do what you want to do. If you're looking for that stuff, I'll be honest with you, tractorhouse.com, good place to look. I actually like looking on there just for whatever and to kill time, just because I'm weird like that. But again, you know, we just really need to count the costs and set you up. And this is something I know quite a bit about just because I grew up in it. And I would love to have that conversation with you if you're thinking about moving to Kentucky and doing that. Send us a comment or give me a call. We did a video going from big city to small town. Are you country enough? It actually talks about our blueberry farm. We had about 10 acres of blueberries at one point in our lifetime, which was 10 acres of manual labor, and it was crazy, and we actually did pretty well with it. And then I had a guy who wanted a blueberry farm, so we sold him a blueberry farm. And so, but that kind of talks about Val's perspective coming from Columbus, Ohio, to kind of go into that and gives you kind of maybe a relatable point of view. I highly recommend you check that video out. But guys, seriously, if this is something that you want to do or you want to have a conversation, I would love to have a conversation with you. This, again, you know, this is the stuff I like to do, so just feel free to reach out. And honestly, if you can pull it off, it's such a great way of life for your family. It's such a peaceful, you get such a sense of accomplishment when you do all this stuff that it's hard to explain. And I highly recommend, if you can do it and you want to do it, by all means, life is short, do it. I hope you found this video helpful. Like and subscribe if you don't mind, and we'll talk to you shortly. We'll see you guys soon.